We would like to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the lands on which we and all of you meet. We pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging.
Welcome to the podcast, Sex, Love and Science with Lauren and Lauren, two sex and relationship experts.
We will address all of the big issues in sex, love, and relationships.
We recognize that humanity is diverse. All bodies, orientations, and sexualities are welcome. Well, this is Lauren Muratori.
And Lauren Bradley.
And welcome back to Sex, Love, and Science. Today we're talking about capacity. You're probably wondering, what the heck do we mean about capacity? Well, we're doing an episode on the different levels of capacity for people who experience life. You've had an exhausting week. You might have been working 12-hour days. Your partner's been working 12-hour days. You both acknowledge you want to be having more intimacy and sex, but your body is just wrecked. That's what we're talking about today.
Yeah, I think there's a real myth that everyone should be ready to have sex and have full PIV, penis and vagina penetrative sex and readiness to go all the time. You know, it's like saying you should be ready to eat a full course meal at every point of the day. You know, often we have different capacities, right? We have different amounts we can give to sex, maybe even different levels of interest in sex as well. And we still need to be able to work within that kind of parameter to feel sexually satisfied.
Yeah, and I think this is common for a lot of people. So many couples come into practice and they both are working. Maybe they have families, maybe they have extended families that they have to look after, lots of obligations, lots of a huge social life, and they're wrecked, but they're wanting to come in and figure out how to have sex. And they cannot turn down the dial of their life. They might have to learn how to say no to a few things here and there, but there might be a lot of life that they can't say no to. Do you see a lot of that?
Yeah, I see a lot of that. A lot of people that are saying, you know, look, we want to make sex a priority, and that's why we've come to sex therapy, right?
Yeah.
But, you know, I've only got this much of my life to give to this. And how can I still be satisfied when I've only got a small amount of myself that I can give to this? Or maybe there's a discrepancy in that where one partner is, you know, fully into sex and they've read all the books and they've listened to our podcast and they've gone to their therapy and they know all about sex, right? And their partner's like, yeah, well, I've got, you know, work and I've got my hobbies and I've got my family, my friends, and like sex is, yeah, it's something I do sometimes. You know, how can we meet the needs of two very different people with very different interests and varying capacities around sex?
Yeah, well, and now you're just describing those disinterested libido types, which is, And, well, disinterest is a little bit different than to capacity too, but when you have the two together, it's then even more of a interesting dynamic to work with, because it's harder to get someone who's disinterested interested when they don't have the capacity versus somebody who's interested who does have the capacity. Hopefully I just didn't blow your minds out there.
In a good way, Lauren.
Did that make sense?
Yeah. So disinterested libido type is someone that's just not really that interested in sex. They're just not wanting to engage sexually. They don't really think about it that much, as opposed to someone that might have like responsive desire, which is someone who does want sex, but they just have to have some input and some stimuli to get them ready for sex. There is an interest there though.
Correct. Yep. Back to that magic equation, that sex will equal desire plus a willingness. So when we're talking about capacity, we're talking about people who do have a willingness. They might be high willingness, but a low desire due to not having much capacity due to the conditions of the life that they just had for the week.
Yeah, so let's look at some of the reasons why you might have a lower than standard capacity for sexual engagement.
Oh, being wrecked, burnt out,
human condition,
having children,
the patriarchy, society, the news and what's happening in the world right now.
Oh gosh, a really awful day at work.
Yeah, diet culture.
Yeah.
There's a whole range of reasons, you know, why you might not feel 100% capable or interested in wanting to engage sexually.
Totally. And so you come home and, you know, you have your routine, you cook dinner, maybe you're cleaning up, maybe you're bathing children, maybe, you know, you have to go feed the dogs and give them a walk. Whatever you do, you've got a night routine. And after having a really busy day and maybe being around people and having your energy drained, sometimes people just want to decompress. They need to kind of just chill out. And I think that's pretty fair.
Yeah. We live in a 24/7 world, right? It's really hard to have any kind of freedom to have stillness to kind of make a choice about what you want to do. Often we're just stuck in the motions of things.
And what a paradox is to promote mental health and mental well-being, really, and the ability for self-care, and then also promote how to have prioritized sex. It sounds a bit funny when I'm saying it out loud. And what's the perfect balance? And I don't think that I can say there's a perfect balance.
Yeah, I think that's bringing in perfection is a great thing to raise, Lauren. A lot of people want to have this idea of perfection. A perfect person is someone that wants sex all the time, that has 100% capacity for sex all the time. I mean, imagine how scary that would be if that was an actual person, right? And how unrealistic that is. It's really common to kind of maybe have like a 90% interest in sex and then like a 10% capacity because you're slammed at work that week, or you're in another country from your partner and you can't physically have sex, or you can't, you're sharing a room with your colleague and you can't self-pleasure.
Yeah, or you've got gastro or the flu, and you just don't have the capacity to kind of get your body there, which again, is fair enough.
Absolutely. And I guess, for a lot of the people out there that are spoonies or people with disability, I have a lot of really close friends that have chronic illness that talk a lot about how their chronic illness has affected their capacity and desire to have sex, even though their willingness, they want to, but their capacity is really low for what they can do sometimes as well.
So what do you do? Here we go. The $1 million question is, well, there's we can normalize all the different ways, that will potentially affect the capacity. What can you do and how can you look at this differently? I think that's really the question of the day.
Yeah. And how can you try and find moments to engage sexually that meet the capacity that you're at?
Yeah. Yeah. And changing what even sex means.
Yeah. Broadening your definition.
Funny that.
Yeah. I think, one of the biggest things that we need to do, and often one of the most missed things that we don't do, is actually check in. What is my capacity?
Yes.
What's going on for me right now? Being attuned to what's happening in your body and how much you've got to give. I think we're really bad as a society at doing that. And I myself really struggle with that sometimes too. We're often told to push and keep pushing, but we don't often get told to stop and check in.
Yeah. And then, I mean, that's 100% spot on. I think that's a brilliant thing to point out. Then I'm just going to say, and then how hard is it to tell your partner that?
Yes. So point 2, right? So your partner does not know your inner world. You cannot expect your partner to know what's going on for you and what capacity you're at.
Yeah. And look, on the contrary, I'm going to kind of say the other side of the coin to this equation is partners who hear their partner come home after a long day and they're saying they're exhausted and they had a bad day, who then make the assumption that their partner has zero interest in sex when really they're just wanting to talk about their emotions, and that decompression and that connection to your partner actually is bonding and they actually do have a willingness to want sex. It's just offloading. So just pointing that out as well.
Yeah. Capacity can look different to different people, right? Yeah. 100%. And I think, sometimes there's this fear of saying to your partner, hey, I'm interested, because you're worried that maybe if you say you've got some capacity, they'll expect you to have 100% capacity.
Exactly. Like, maybe I'm up for, some naked cuddling, or, let's just make out for a little while. And then you're worried that your partner's going to expect something from that. And maybe your partner is expecting something from that. And again, this is why being honest, and also how do you then work with these two honest approaches, is pretty important, and to balance.
Yeah, 100%. And knowing where your partner is at capacity-wise can help you to kind of manage your own expectations of what you might ask of them.
Bingo. Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's really important as part of this process to really communicate your own capacity and what you feel you have readiness for, noting that this is ongoing communication, because your capacity may increase the more pleasure you have.
True. And this doesn't mean you have to be disappointed either, right? Like if you go through a stint of, one person is just having a huge life transition and then they don't have much capacity, it's not to say that you're being rejected or disregarded or your sex life is taking a massive downturn. It's understanding that where their capacity is at and that some intimacy is probably better than nothing. I mean, especially if they're willing to be doing something, isn't that better than nothing? Isn't that still promoting a healthy, happy, good enough sex life?
Yeah, I hear this a lot with clients where the person that has higher capacity says, hey, I'm actually really happy with just a kiss and a cuddle. Give me that. That would be wonderful. That they understand a lot of the time that they may not get, the full 100% full PIV penetrative sex or something similar, that they may actually just be cool with having something from you or just an expression of your physical connection in some format.
So on that note, I think you should really probably ask your partner what their expectations are. Like, what allowances does the relationship make for a diverse range of intimacy? Because if you I'm going to say a one-trick pony and you've got a script and you can only do that one thing and everything has to always be that way, then that's the expectation. And if you don't have capacity, you are missing out on so many other wonderful things.
Yeah, I think it's all too common these days for a lot of people to skip all of the fun steps of foreplay and pleasure and really getting to know each other's bodies. And often we want to go jump in straight into having full PIV or full sex, right? But we're actually missing out on all of that explorative work, which we probably would have done generations before, may have spent a bit more time in, because maybe if their level of discomfort around sexuality led them to be a bit more open in other areas of sexual connection.
Yeah. And, maybe in those societies there was, it wasn't that 24/7 world as you were approaching. Has the digital age helped our sex life or hindered it?
Sounds like an episode sometime.
Totally. So I think, talking about back to the capacity, it's really a matter of understanding too. I think what you pointed out, Lauren, is your bodies. I would say at least 50% of people who I speak to tell me they don't know what they like, which is a big number. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's pretty close to that in my clinical practice. And that is for all genders.
Yeah, the knowledge gap for pleasure is so high. There's a lot of disparity between what people do and what they actually enjoy. And, we know that pleasure is the number one motivator for sex, right? How good the sex is, how much pleasure we're getting. So we need to create more opportunities for pleasure. And the great irony is that, the more transactions we have when we're at like 10% capacity that are pleasurable, the more likely we are to have more extended, prolonged periods of sex as well.
Yeah, good point. Well, and that just again goes back to if you've got the willingness and you are creating that desire, you're probably going to have sex.
Yeah.
But shh, don't tell anybody.
Yeah, and just focus on the pleasure, just focus on what's available. And one of the things I love to get clients to do is to look at what kinds of things you can do at different capacities you're experiencing. So if you're at 10% capacity, what does that look like for you? And this could be sexually or it could be emotionally as well. What are some 10% emotional things that you can do with 10% energy or 10% capacity? And then moving up the percentages.
Yeah.
And if you're someone that really struggles for capacity, then you want to have a really long list of 10%.
Yes, that's a good point. Or at least be curious and want to explore it.
Yeah. And then it's a conversation with your partner of, hey, I'm at 10%. Here's all the stuff we could explore. What do you like from this list? Okay, let's do that together. And then you check in after that. Where are you at now? Hey, I'm 20% now. Okay, let's look at the 20% column. Let's do something from that. Hey, I'm 70. That was really good. I'm getting energy just resting with you. Let's go up to 70. Cool. Okay, what's in that? Good. That's great. Now, where are you at now? Now I'm exhausted. Let's go to bed, right?
Yeah.
So that's okay. Because again, we're following the pathway for pleasure and we're following what feels good for what capacity we have. And that match of pleasure and capacity is close enough that we're probably more likely to lead up to 100 that way.
I like that approach, Lauren. And, that would work really well for a lot of my pragmatic and logical clients. I think that's a nice way of looking at it for some people who are very organized and structured. So I want to hear, Lauren, tell me about common 10% items that you hear or talk about in your practice?
Yeah, so some of the things you can do when you're 10% in terms of sexual, physical pleasure, hand holding.
Oh,
simple and effective. Another one is long, slow kisses. So there is some research, and I've forgotten the name of the researcher, around looking at long kiss durations.
That's right. Isn't there a magic number? I think, is it 5 or 7 seconds?
Yeah, I think it's 7. I think it's 7 or 6, 7 or 6.
Oh, see.
And hugs. There's also another one, I think, on 30-second hugs as well.
Yes.
Yes, and this actually having an effect on your physiology and creating chemicals that actually relax you, that soothe your nervous system. So there's actually some beautiful health benefits of having a long, slow kiss and a long, slow hug.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess kind of what you're hinting at, it's somatically also checking or regulating the body and doing that together. I like I like those long hugs. I give those to a lot of clients where your hearts can be pressed up against each other, or at least you can feel it in each other's bodies, which is a really nice form of connection and just a way to kind of regulate the body and also soothe and regulate the self.
Definitely. And I guess, being mindful that, being comfortable in your body is a privilege too, right? So we need to be mindful that some people may only want sort of indirect touch in the 10% column too. So even if that's you sort of giving your partner something soft that they can touch themselves with and you being there while they do that, or maybe giving your partner like a weighted blanket or something and being there for them to experience physical pleasure in that way might be an option for you, because not everyone wants their partner to directly touch them. This is really common for new mums that get what we say is touched out from lots of constant touch. So what do we do for physical and sexual connection when they're feeling touched out? It's tricky.
Oh, yes.
So we need to really broaden our definition of what feels good for pleasure. And I guess I try and ask clients to really extend their senses in this way, because again, we often think about pleasure as touch. But if you don't want any touch, then giving your partner a sexy smell of a lovely cologne that you wear that's really hot might be a way to entice their pleasure and their erotic senses without them having to even do anything physically.
Oh, exactly. And just really nice oils in the house, candles. I've got a lot of clients who really like to just fill their house up with beautiful smells and who actually can start getting turned on by smells, which I think is quite cool and easier to do.
Yeah, it's definitely on the lower end of the effort spectrum, and one that we can do no matter what our body state is, provided we have a sense of smell that we can use for that. So using sounds as well, playing some sexy auditory literature, some sexy stories, right? Listening to bedtime stories can be a really cute way to connect with each other sexually when you can't involve your body as well.
Oh, perfect. And, going back to, it doesn't have to be touch-based. You can also do things for yourself like a hot shower.
Yes.
A bubble bath with some really nice scents in it. There's different ways to still promote that within the body.
Yeah, because you might be listening to this and you might not be in a relationship and just want to increase your physical sexual connection to yourself and be operating for self-pleasure at different capacities.
And these are still important to consider. You do not have to be touching your genitals to ensure that you have pleasure.
No. They're just one of your sexual organs. What other sexual parts do you have to yourself, right?
Exactly.
Another cute one is putting on some sexy clothes.
Yeah.
Feeling good in your clothes and making yourself feel a little sexy, little sneaky sexy underwear under your work clothes is another one. If you feel like you're lazy, you can't do anything, just put something cute on. If that works for you, may not work for you, but again, it's not involving anyone else.
Yeah. And what you're just kind of highlighting is feeling good at the self. Mm-hmm. Pleasure to the self.
Yes. And again, enticing you to connect in with your body, that mindfulness of your senses, that ability to get out of your head a little bit and into your body a little bit more.
Yeah. All right. So what would be, out of curiosity, what do you hear as maybe the higher range of capacity? So people who are 70%, what are they doing?
And again, just a caveat, somebody's 70% might be somebody else's 90%, right?
Ooh, thank you. Thank you.
So some people, when I give them some examples of what to do, they might put all of those things in the 90% column. They're like, that's way too hard for me to do. That's not what I do when I'm at 70%. That I need to be 100% for that. That's okay, because your capacity is unique to you.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I guess what in my practice, what I like to do, I don't know if I've spoken to this on another episode before, is I just do the basic Venn diagram.
Mm-hmm.
So here's a circle of things that bring my body pleasure. Here's a circle of things that bring your body pleasure. Where do they overlap? And then, in that list, depending on, how the day's gone and where you're at and who's got the willingness, is you would look at that overlap. And sometimes that's just a nice, quick, easy way to just kind of pick things off of a list.
Yeah. Yeah, get ahead of yourself on this. It's hard to kind of come up with things in the moment. And sometimes it can be really cute to plan this out for yourselves. And I guess to add the spontaneity, you can put it in the hat and pull one out, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be, you work your way down the list in methodical order, but it can still be fun and spontaneous, but it just means that you've had some understanding of where to start with rather than sort of winging it on the fly, which can be really hard.
Yeah, and also having the confidence to make those counter offers. I think we spoke in the sexual initiation episode, is if your partner's at a capacity and put something on the table and you don't have that, to feel authentic, to feel really stable within yourself, to just know that's not within your capacity, and offer something that you do have capacity for. Or if you are a hard no, that's also acceptable.
Yeah, I think we need to be more accepting that, two people are, if we look at it, probably more likely to be at different capacities than the same, right? The odds are.
Yeah.
That's the case. So we do need to be able to have diverse experiences that we can give and receive. And, why do we have to both be experiencing the same pleasure at the same time? If you're feeling 70%, but your partner's feeling really lazy, and you might use a toy on them while they just lie back and relax.
Yeah. Well, and exactly. And, the person who's at 70, are they willing to just stay there? Are they expecting to go to 100?
Yeah.
Or are they expecting their partner who might be at 10 to get up to 70? So I think that's kind of, part of the equation as well.
Yeah, that's where that constant communication comes in, because it can shift as you're playing. Maybe you start at 70, your partner's at 40, and then they jump up to 70% with you, and you're like, ooh, moving towards 80, 90, 100 now. Let's see if we progress. So you check in. Does this feel pleasurable? What about the next step?
Yeah. This makes me think of Brene Brown on a non-sexual topic, though, talking about capacities. So when two people get home, you'd say where you're at. So, if you come home and you're saying, look, I'm only at 30%. If your partner isn't at 70%, which means that they might have to clean up the dishes or pick up around the house, that they've got to pick up what you don't have the capacity for. So if two people aren't there at the 100%, you've got to then chat about it and figure out who's doing what and how do you support each other. So it's more about communicating, how do you support each other, rather than engaging in conflict, resentment, and I've got to do all this. And so I think maybe it'd be interesting to look at sex like that.
Yeah, because sometimes, we have relationships where one person's always at 70% and one person, maybe they have chronic illness and they are at 10% all the time. And that might be them trying. That 10% might actually be their 100% trying really hard, right?
Yeah.
So we need to allow for that and have some understanding that different people have different resourcing to do this.
So it's really just thinking about sex in a different way.
Yeah.
Which is what we're hopefully bringing light to, is just to think about your sex life a little bit different. And, a lot of people don't really talk about this area or think about, the capacities. It's more of that expectation, or it's either very black or white, whether they're having sex or not. So I think this is a nice way to look at it. And it's those several shades of gray of looking at something to hopefully enhance your intimacy.
Yeah, I think if every person spent a little bit of time exploring what 40% feels like for them, you'd have a whole range of things to add to your sexual menu of stuff that you enjoy that you can share with your partner, and really increase your diversity of ways that you get to 100%.
Totally. So hopefully gave you some really good ideas or things to think about, and you can start mapping out what you'd like to try and getting in tune with yourself, and just kind of understanding that life is going to be so different, and so is your body, and then plan accordingly.
Yeah, and try and find some fun activities that fit the capacity that you're at, because sexuality can meet you where you're at. You don't have to try and achieve to it to get it. It meets you where you're at. And there is always something to do for your sexual and sensual body at whatever capacity you are, if you would like to do it.
Absolutely. Well, thanks today, Lauren. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Lauren. Chat with you soon.